Close your eyes and imagine standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza as the sun sets over the golden sands of Egypt. The air is warm and still, carrying whispers of a civilization that flourished for over 3,000 years. The massive stone blocks rise before you, each one a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. Tonight, we journey through the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and mysteries that have captivated humanity for millennia. This is the story of ancient Egypt, a civilization that gave the world writing, mathematics, medicine, and monuments that still stand as wonders of the ancient world. Fact 1. Ancient Egyptian civilization lasted over 3,000 years, longer than any other ancient civilization in human history. It began around 3100 BCE when King Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt into a single kingdom, and continued until 30 BCE when Cleopatra VII died and Rome absorbed Egypt into its empire. To put this extraordinary time span in perspective, Cleopatra lived closer in time to the invention of the iPhone than to the construction of the Great Pyramid. During these 3 millennia, Egypt witnessed the rise and fall of 30 dynasties, periods of glory and decline, foreign invasions, and indigenous revivals, yet the fundamental culture remained remarkably consistent. Fact 2. The Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest man-made structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years. Built around 2560 BCE for Pharaoh Khufu, it originally stood 481 feet tall and was constructed from approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2 and 80 tons. The precision of its construction is astounding. The base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters, and the sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of better than 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15 of 1 degree. It remained the world's tallest structure until the Lincoln Cathedral was completed in England in 1311 CE. Modern engineers still debate exactly how the ancient Egyptians achieved such precision with the tools available to them. Fact 3. The ancient Egyptians didn't use camels for most of their history. Camels weren't introduced to Egypt until the Persian invasion around 525 BCE, long after the pyramids were built and after most of Egypt's greatest monuments were already ancient. Instead, Egyptians used donkeys for transportation and heavy labor, and boats for travel along the Nile. The iconic image of pyramids and camels together that we see in movies and photographs is actually historically inaccurate for most of ancient Egyptian history. When you imagine the builders of the pyramids, picture them with donkeys, not camels. Fact 4. Pharaohs never let their hair be seen and always wore elaborate crowns or headdresses. The royal headdress, called a nemes, was made of striped cloth and is the most recognizable symbol of pharaonic power today. King Tutankhamun's famous golden death mask shows him wearing this iconic headdress, preserving his image for eternity. The pharaoh also wore different crowns for different occasions. The white crown represented Upper Egypt, the red crown represented Lower Egypt, and the double crown symbolized the unified kingdom. These crowns weren't just decorative but were considered magical objects that conveyed divine power to the wearer. Fact 5. Ancient Egyptians invented one of the earliest forms of writing called hieroglyphics around 3200 BCE. This complex system used over 700 symbols that could represent sounds, words, or ideas. The word hieroglyph comes from Greek meaning sacred carving, as the Greeks believed these symbols were purely religious. In reality, hieroglyphics were used for everything from religious texts to shopping lists. These beautiful symbols covered temple walls, tombs, and papyrus scrolls, preserving Egyptian knowledge, history, literature, and daily records for millennia. Learning to read and write hieroglyphics required years of training, which is why scribes held such prestigious positions in society. Fact 6. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799 by French soldiers in Napoleon's army, was the key to deciphering hieroglyphics. This black granite stone contained the same text written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphics, Demotic Egyptian, and Ancient Greek. Because scholars could read Ancient Greek, they had a key to unlock the other 2 scripts. French scholar Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code in 1822 after years of painstaking work, unlocking thousands of years of Egyptian history that had been silent for centuries. The moment hieroglyphics were deciphered, the ancient Egyptians could speak to us again across the vast expanse of time. Fact 7. Ancient Egyptians were among the first people to make bread and developed baking into an art form. They discovered that letting dough sit before baking created lighter, airier bread through natural fermentation. Bread was so important to Egyptian life that it was used as currency, and workers were often paid in loaves of bread and jars of beer. The Egyptians developed over 40 different types of bread, from simple flatbreads to elaborate pastries sweetened with honey and flavored with herbs. Bread-making scenes appear frequently in tomb paintings, showing the importance of this staple food in Egyptian culture. Fact 8. Egyptian women had more rights and freedoms than women in most other ancient civilizations. They could own property independently, conduct business transactions, serve as witnesses in court cases, and initiate divorce proceedings. Women could enter most professions, including becoming physicians, and could rise to positions of considerable power. Women could become pharaohs, with Hatshepsut being one of the most successful pharaohs in Egyptian history, male or female. She ruled for over 20 years during the 18th dynasty, during which Egypt prospered and expanded its trade networks. Egyptian marriage contracts protected women's rights and property, a progressive concept for the ancient world. Fact 9. The ancient Egyptians invented papyrus, the precursor to modern paper. Made from the papyrus plant that grew abundantly along the Nile River, sheets were created by layering strips of the plant's pith in perpendicular directions, pressing them together, and allowing them to dry. This created a smooth, durable writing surface that could be rolled into scrolls. This invention revolutionized record-keeping and allowed Egyptian knowledge to be preserved and transmitted across generations. Papyrus was so valuable that Egypt monopolized its production and export, making it a major source of wealth. The word paper itself derives from papyrus. Fact 10. The Nile River was the absolute lifeblood of ancient Egypt, and without it, this great civilization could never have existed. The annual flooding of the Nile deposited rich black soil along its banks, making the land incredibly fertile in an otherwise desert region. The Egyptians called their land Kemet, meaning the black land, referring to this dark, fertile soil, in contrast to the red land of the desert that surrounded them. The Nile's predictable flood cycle allowed for reliable agriculture and supported a large population. The river also served as Egypt's highway, making transportation and communication easy in a time before roads. Everything in Egyptian life revolved around the Nile's rhythm. Fact 11. Ancient Egyptians were master astronomers who studied the heavens with remarkable precision. They created a 365-day calendar based on astronomical observations, very close to our modern calendar and far more accurate than calendars used by other ancient civilizations. They identified constellations, tracked the movements of planets and stars, and aligned their pyramids and temples with incredible astronomical precision. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of just 0.05 degrees, better than the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England, which is off by 0.06 degrees. The Egyptians used astronomy not just for calendars but for navigation, religious ceremonies, and timing agricultural activities. Fact 12. Cats were sacred animals in ancient Egypt and were treated with a reverence that might seem extreme today. The goddess Batet was depicted as a cat or a woman with a cat's head, representing protection, fertility, and motherhood. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could be punishable by death. When a family cat died, the entire household would go into mourning, shaving their eyebrows as a sign of grief and holding elaborate funeral ceremonies. Cats were so revered that they were often mummified and buried in special cat cemeteries. Thousands of cat mummies have been discovered, showing the deep bond between ancient Egyptians and their feline companions. Fact 13. The ancient Egyptians practiced mummification to preserve bodies for the afterlife, and this process was both an art and a science. The procedure took 70 days and involved multiple complex steps. First, embalmers removed internal organs through small incisions, with each organ except the heart placed in special canopic jars. The brain was removed through the nose using a hook and was discarded, as Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the center of intelligence and emotion. The body was then dried using natron salt, taking about 40 days. Finally, the body was wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen strips, with amulets placed between the layers for protection. The entire process required specialized knowledge passed down through generations of embalmers. Fact 14. The canopic jars used during mummification stored the deceased's vital organs for use in the afterlife. For jars held the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver. Each jar was protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus, and each had a lid shaped like a different head: human for the liver, baboon for the lungs, jackal for the stomach, and falcon for the intestines. These jars were placed in the tomb alongside the mummy, ensuring the deceased would be complete in the afterlife. The heart was the only organ left in the body, as it would be needed for the judgment ceremony in the afterlife. Fact 15. The Book of the Dead was not actually a single book but a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions to guide the deceased through the dangers of the afterlife. These texts were written on papyrus scrolls and placed in tombs, often tucked inside the coffin or mummy wrappings. They contained over 200 different spells to help the dead navigate the underworld, protect themselves from demons, and achieve eternal life. Each copy was personalized with the deceased person's name inserted into the spells. Wealthier individuals could afford longer, more elaborate versions with beautiful illustrations, while poorer people had shorter, simpler versions. Fact 16. Ancient Egyptians believed in an elaborate afterlife judgment ceremony that determined their eternal fate. The deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. If the heart was lighter than the feather, it meant the person had led a good, honest life and could enter the afterlife paradise. If the heart was heavier, burdened by sins and wrongdoing, it was devoured by Ammit, a terrifying creature that was part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus. The person would then cease to exist entirely, which the Egyptians considered the worst possible fate. This belief system encouraged ethical behavior and honesty throughout life. Fact 17. The Valley of the Kings, located on the west bank of the Nile near ancient Thebes, contains 63 known tombs of pharaohs and powerful nobles. This royal necropolis was used for nearly 500 years during the New Kingdom, from approximately 1539 to 1075 BCE. The tombs were cut deep into the rock cliffs, some extending over 200 feet into the mountain. Despite being hidden and guarded, most tombs were robbed in ancient times. The tombs were filled with treasures to accompany the pharaohs into the afterlife: golden furniture, jewelry, weapons, chariots, clothing, food, and even board games for entertainment in eternity. Fact 18. King Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in 1822 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, is the most famous archaeological find in history and captured the world's imagination. Unlike other royal tombs that had been thoroughly looted in antiquity, Tut's tomb was found nearly intact with over 5,000 objects packed into its small chambers. These included his solid gold inner coffin weighing 110 kilograms, his iconic golden death mask, golden thrones, chariots, weapons, clothing, jewelry, and even jars of preserved food. The discovery took Carter and his team 10 years to fully excavate and catalog. The find captivated the world and sparked renewed interest in ancient Egypt that continues to this day. Fact 19. The supposed curse of the pharaohs became famous after several people associated with opening Tut's tomb died under seemingly mysterious circumstances. Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy British aristocrat who funded the excavation, died just months after the tomb was opened from an infected mosquito bite. Several other people connected to the excavation died in the following years, leading newspapers to sensationalize a curse. However, Howard Carter himself, who actually opened the tomb and spent the most time inside, lived for another 17 years, dying at age 64. Statistical analysis shows people involved with the tomb's discovery lived normal lifespans, suggesting the curse was more media sensation than supernatural reality. Fact 20. Ancient Egyptians invented many cosmetics and beauty products that were surprisingly sophisticated. Both men and women wore makeup, particularly kohl eyeliner made from ground minerals like galena and malachite. This wasn't purely vanity. The dark lines around the eyes helped reduce sun glare from the intense desert sun and had antibacterial properties that protected against eye infections common in the dusty environment. Cleopatra's legendary beauty regimens included milk baths to soften skin, honey face masks for moisturizing, and almond oil for hair. Egyptians also used henna to color hair and nails, and they created perfumes and scented oils that were highly prized throughout the ancient world. Fact 21. The Library of Alexandria was one of the ancient world's greatest repositories of knowledge and learning. Founded around 300 BCE during the Ptolemaic period, it housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing works from across the known world. The library attracted scholars from many nations who came to study mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature, and philosophy. The librarians actively collected works, sometimes confiscating books from ships that docked in Alexandria's harbor, copying them, and returning the copies while keeping the originals. The library's gradual destruction over several centuries represents one of history's greatest losses of knowledge. We can only imagine what ancient wisdom was lost forever in those flames and through neglect. Fact 22. Ancient Egyptians practiced dentistry and had surprisingly advanced medical knowledge for their time. Medical papyri describe treatments for various ailments, surgical procedures, and even birth control methods. They understood that the heart pumped blood through the body, though they didn't fully understand circulation. They performed surgeries including skull surgery to relieve pressure from head injuries. Dental problems were extremely common due to sand particles in their bread, which wore down teeth to painful nubs. Dentists could treat abscesses, pull teeth, and even fashion bridges from gold wire to replace missing teeth. Some mummies show evidence of dental work that's surprisingly sophisticated. Fact 23. The Ankh symbol represented eternal life and was one of ancient Egypt's most important religious symbols. Shaped like a cross with a loop at the top, it appeared throughout Egyptian art and hieroglyphics. Gods and pharaohs were often depicted holding the ankh by the loop, sometimes holding it to someone's lips to symbolize the breath of life. The symbol represented both physical life and the eternal life of the soul after death. Today, it remains one of the most recognized and popular symbols of ancient Egypt, frequently appearing in jewelry, art, and tattoos around the world. Fact 24. Egyptian pharaohs wore false beards as a symbol of their divine status and connection to the gods. These ceremonial beards were made of metal or carved wood and attached to the chin with straps that went around the head. Even female pharaohs like Hatshepsut wore these artificial beards during official occasions and ceremonies. The beards were often long and braided, and sometimes curled at the end. They represented the pharaoh's role as a living god and their connection to Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who was traditionally depicted with a beard. This tradition continued throughout Egyptian history, spanning thousands of years. Fact 25. The ancient Egyptians built massive temples that still stand today as testaments to their architectural and engineering genius. The Karnak temple complex in Luxor is so enormous that it could fit several European cathedrals inside its walls. The Great Hypostyle Hall alone contains 134 massive columns arranged in 16 rows, with some reaching 80 feet high and over 30 feet around. These columns are carved with hieroglyphics and reliefs depicting pharaohs and gods. These temples weren't just religious centers but also economic powerhouses, controlling vast wealth, land, and labor. They served as banks, schools, hospitals, and administrative centers, making them the hearts of their communities. Fact 26. Hieroglyphics could be read from left to right, right to left, or even top to bottom, making them remarkably flexible for artistic composition. The direction was indicated by which way the human and animal figures faced. You always read toward the faces of the figures. This flexibility allowed scribes to create aesthetically balanced inscriptions on temple walls and monuments, adapting the text to fit the available space while maintaining visual harmony. This artistic consideration in writing was unique to Egyptian hieroglyphics and shows how they valued beauty in all aspects of their culture. Fact 27. Ancient Egyptians invented bowling, or at least a very similar game, nearly 5,000 years ago. Archaeologists discovered a room in an Egyptian tomb from 3200 BCE that appeared to be an ancient bowling alley. Stone balls and pins were found, and the room's layout suggests it was designed for rolling balls to knock down pins. This makes bowling one of the oldest sports known to humanity. The Egyptians believed in taking their favorite pastimes with them to the afterlife, which is why this bowling set was buried in a tomb. Fact 28. Cleopatra VII, the most famous of ancient Egypt's rulers, was not actually Egyptian by blood or ethnicity. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which was Greek-Macedonian, descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals who took control of Egypt after Alexander's death. However, Cleopatra was the first of her family line to actually learn the Egyptian language and embraced Egyptian culture and religion. She was also highly educated and brilliant, speaking 9 languages fluently, studying mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy. She ruled Egypt for over 20 years and was the last active pharaoh before Egypt became a Roman province. Fact 29. The ancient Egyptians used moldy bread to treat infected wounds and infections. The mold that grows on old bread contains penicillin, a powerful antibiotic, though the Egyptians didn't understand the science behind why it worked. They simply knew from experience that applying moldy bread to wounds helped them heal and prevented infection. This practice predated Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin by thousands of years and shows the Egyptians' advanced understanding of practical medicine based on careful observation. Fact 30. Egyptian children didn't wear clothes until they reached adolescence, around age 12 or 13. The hot desert climate made clothing unnecessary for young children, who often went completely naked. Adults wore simple linen garments, usually white or natural colored, as linen was cool, comfortable, and breathable in the intense heat. Only the wealthy could afford colored or elaborately decorated clothing, which required expensive dyes and skilled weavers. The simple, practical approach to clothing in the heat shows the Egyptians' sensible adaptation to their environment. Fact 31. The Great Sphinx of Giza is much older and more mysterious than we once thought. While traditionally believed to date from Pharaoh Khufu's reign around 2500 BCE, making it about 4,500 years old, erosion patterns on the monument suggest it might be significantly older. Water erosion visible on the Sphinx indicates it may have been built during a much wetter period in Egypt's climate history, possibly thousands of years before the pyramids. This controversial theory suggests the Sphinx could be one of humanity's oldest monumental sculptures, though mainstream Egyptologists continue to debate this interpretation. Fact 32. Ancient Egyptians played board games for entertainment and believed they could continue playing in the afterlife. Senet was the most popular game, played on a board with 30 squares arranged in 3 rows of 10. Game boards have been found in tombs throughout Egypt, including an elaborate set in Tutankhamun's tomb with a playing board and pieces made of gold and ivory. The exact rules of Senet have been lost to time, though modern scholars have made educated guesses based on tomb paintings showing the game being played and fragments of ancient texts that mention it. Fact 33. The ancient Egyptians were excellent shipbuilders who constructed elaborate boats from papyrus reeds and, later, wood imported from Lebanon. The solar boat of Khufu, discovered in a sealed pit near the Great Pyramid in 1954, was a 143-foot-long wooden ship designed to carry the pharaoh's soul across the heavens with the sun god Ra. The boat was so well preserved after 4,500 years underground that experts believe it could theoretically still sail today. This magnificent vessel required 1,224 separate pieces of wood, all fitted together without nails using only rope and wooden pegs. Fact 34. Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great, ruled Egypt for 66 years and fathered over 100 children from 8 official wives and numerous concubines. His massive family required a special tomb in the Valley of the Queens just to house his many sons, as traditional burial places couldn't accommodate them all. He built more monuments and statues than any other pharaoh, and many bore his name and image. He lived to be over 90 years old, an extraordinary age for ancient times when most people died in their 30s or 40s. His mummy shows he suffered from arthritis, dental problems, and hardened arteries in his final years. Fact 35. The ancient Egyptians invented toothpaste and toothbrushes, showing their concern for dental hygiene. They created a cleaning powder made from crushed rock salt, mint, dried iris flowers, and pepper. While quite abrasive by modern standards, it helped keep teeth clean and breath fresh. They also created breath mints from frankincense, myrrh, and cinnamon. Toothbrushes were made from frayed twigs, which were chewed to create bristles. Despite these efforts, dental health was generally poor due to the sandy flour that wore down teeth. Fact 36. Egyptian workers who built the pyramids were not slaves but paid laborers who lived in nearby villages. They received wages in the form of food, beer, and other goods. Archaeological evidence shows they had healthcare, with doctors available to treat injuries and illnesses. Graffiti found inside the pyramids shows work gangs gave themselves proud names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, and they competed against each other for glory. These workers were skilled craftsmen and laborers who took pride in their work on these eternal monuments. Fact 37. Ancient Egyptians loved beer and consumed it daily as a staple beverage, much like we drink water or coffee today. Beer was safer to drink than water from the Nile, which could carry diseases. It also provided important nutrition, essentially serving as liquid bread. Even children drank a weak, diluted beer. Workers building the pyramids received about 4 liters of beer per day as part of their standard wages. Beer was used in religious ceremonies as offerings to the gods and prescribed as medicine for various ailments. Different varieties of beer existed, from thick, nourishing types to lighter, more refreshing brews. Fact 38. The ancient Egyptians practiced sophisticated irrigation and farming techniques, many of which are still used in Egypt today. They developed the shadif, a hand-operated device for lifting water that consists of a long pole balanced on a beam with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. They created an extensive canal system to direct Nile floodwaters to their fields, maximizing the area that could be cultivated. They grew wheat for bread, barley for beer, flax for linen cloth, and numerous vegetables including onions, garlic, leeks, lettuce, and cucumbers. Their farming techniques sustained one of the ancient world's largest populations. Fact 39. Ancient Egyptian mathematics was surprisingly advanced for its time. They understood fractions and used them extensively in practical applications. They could calculate the area of circles with reasonable accuracy and used geometry extensively in surveying land and designing pyramids and temples. The Rhind mathematical papyrus, dating to around 1650 BCE, contains 84 mathematical problems and their solutions, covering everything from simple arithmetic to complex geometry. It shows the Egyptians had a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and used it in daily life for everything from calculating tax obligations to planning construction projects. Fact 40. The ancient Egyptians divided both day and night into 12 hours each, giving us our 24-hour day. However, their hours were not of equal length. Daytime hours were longer in summer and shorter in winter, varying with the amount of daylight. They used water clocks, called clepsydras, and sundials to measure time. The water clocks were more accurate than sundials and could work at night. The concept of dividing the day into hours came from counting on their fingers, excluding the thumbs, giving them 10 fingers to count, which they doubled for day and night. Fact 41. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most successful pharaohs, ruled disguised as a man for over 20 years. She wore the false beard and traditional male pharaoh regalia, and in official statues and reliefs, she was depicted with a male body. She led military campaigns, established trade networks, and built magnificent monuments, including her stunning mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. After her death, her stepson Thutmose III attempted to erase her from history by defacing her monuments and removing her name from official records. Despite this, enough evidence survived to reveal her remarkable reign. Fact 42. The ancient Egyptians had an organized police force that maintained law and order throughout the kingdom. Officers carried wooden staffs as symbols of authority and weapons for defense. They were accompanied by trained dogs and even monkeys, which were used to help catch criminals. Police patrolled markets to prevent theft, guarded tombs in the necropolis against robbers, and maintained order in cities. Evidence of their work includes ancient wanted notices written on papyrus describing criminals and offering rewards for their capture. Fact 43. Ancient Egyptians used honey extensively as both medicine and preservative. They understood honey's natural antibacterial properties, though they didn't know the science behind it. They used honey to treat wounds and infections, and it was remarkably effective. Honey was also used to preserve fruits and as a sweetener in food and drink. It was so valuable that it was often used to pay taxes and tribute. Beekeeping was an established practice, with beekeepers tending hives and harvesting honey as a valuable commodity. Fact 44. The ancient Egyptians developed a form of early concrete using a mixture of lime and gypsum. This mortar was used between the massive stone blocks in their pyramids and temples. While not as strong as modern concrete, this ancient mixture has lasted for thousands of years, helping hold these monuments together through millennia of earthquakes, weather, and time. The durability of this early concrete is one reason why Egyptian monuments have survived when structures from other ancient civilizations have crumbled. Fact 45. Ancient Egypt had female doctors and physicians, which was extremely progressive for the ancient world. Merit Taha, who lived around 2700 BCE, is believed to be the world's first known female physician. Her image was carved on a tomb in the Valley of the Kings with an inscription describing her as the chief physician. Other female doctors are mentioned in ancient texts, showing that medicine was one profession where talented women could rise based on skill rather than gender. Fact 46. The ancient Egyptians created the first recorded peace treaty in human history. In 1259 BCE, Pharaoh Ramesses II signed a peace treaty with the Hittite Empire after the Battle of Kadesh ended in a stalemate. The treaty established borders between the two empires, promised mutual military assistance against enemies, and arranged a royal marriage between Ramesses and a Hittite princess. Both empires kept copies of the treaty, and the Egyptian version is carved on temple walls. A copy of this ancient peace treaty hangs in the United Nations building in New York today, honored as a historic document of diplomacy. Fact 47. Ancient Egyptians believed the sun god Ra traveled through the underworld each night, explaining the daily cycle of day and night. According to myth, Ra sailed his solar boat across the sky during the day, bringing light and warmth to the world. At sunset, he descended into the underworld, where he battled the chaos serpent Apophis each night. This nightly battle represented the cosmic struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness. Ra's victory each night ensured the sun would rise again, bringing a new day. The pharaoh was considered Ra's representative on earth, carrying the responsibility of maintaining cosmic order. Fact 48. The ancient Egyptians kept exotic pets as symbols of power and wealth. Pharaohs and nobles kept lions, cheetahs, monkeys, baboons, and even hippos. These animals required extensive resources to maintain and demonstrated the owner's wealth and power. Some animals were trained to perform tasks or provide entertainment. When these exotic pets died, they were sometimes mummified and buried in elaborate animal cemeteries, showing how valued they were. The practice of keeping exotic animals spread from Egypt to other ancient civilizations. Fact 49. Ancient Egyptian art followed strict conventions and rules that remained remarkably consistent for thousands of years. Figures were drawn with heads and legs in profile, but torsos facing forward, and eyes drawn as if seen from the front even though the face was in profile. This wasn't due to lack of artistic skill but a deliberate stylistic choice. Egyptians believed art should show the most characteristic and recognizable view of each body part. Size indicated importance. Pharaohs were depicted much larger than common people, and gods larger still. These artistic conventions created a distinctive and immediately recognizable Egyptian style. Fact 50. The ancient Egyptians used makeup not just for beauty but as medicine. The minerals in kohl eyeliner, particularly galena, helped prevent eye infections that were common in Egypt's dusty environment. The lead compounds in galena stimulated the immune system in the delicate eye area. Green eyeshadow made from malachite had similar antibacterial properties. The Egyptians discovered through trial and error that certain minerals protected eye health, though they understood it as magic rather than chemistry. Beauty and health were intimately connected in Egyptian culture, with cosmetics serving both purposes. Fact 51. Scribes held prestigious positions in ancient Egyptian society and were among the elite. Learning to read and write hieroglyphics, hieratic script, and demotic script required years of rigorous training, usually beginning in childhood. Only about 1% of the population was literate, making scribes invaluable. They were exempt from taxes and manual labor, and they could rise to high positions in government. Scribes recorded everything from tax records and census data to religious texts and royal decrees. They were the record keepers, accountants, administrators, and storytellers of their civilization. Fact 52. The ancient Egyptians discovered how to make glass around 3000 BCE, making them among the first glassmakers in history. They created beautiful glass beads, jewelry, amulets, and vessels in vibrant colors including deep blue, turquoise, red, and green. Egyptian glass was highly prized throughout the ancient Mediterranean world and was often given as diplomatic gifts to foreign rulers. The techniques for creating colored glass were closely guarded secrets. Glass objects were considered luxury items, owned only by the wealthy and powerful. Fact 53. Ancient Egyptians used sophisticated geometry to re-establish property boundaries after the annual Nile floods washed away field markers. Surveyors, called harpedonapti, or rope stretchers, used ropes knotted at specific intervals to measure distances and create right angles. They could accurately calculate land areas using geometric formulas. This annual necessity drove the development of Egyptian geometry and mathematics. The Greek mathematician Pythagoras may have learned geometric principles during his travels in Egypt, later developing them into the theorems we know today. Fact 54. The ancient Egyptians worshipped over 2,000 different gods and goddesses throughout their long history. Some deities were worshipped throughout Egypt, like Ra, Osiris, and Isis, while others were local gods specific to certain cities or regions. This flexibility allowed different communities to maintain their local traditions while also participating in national religious festivals. Gods could merge or change over time. Ra combined with Ammonius to become Ammonius Ra, the king of gods. This religious flexibility and diversity allowed Egyptian religion to adapt and survive for 3 millennia. Fact 55. Ancient Egyptian temples and monuments were originally painted in bright, vibrant colors that would astonish modern visitors. The sandstone temples we see today in muted tan and brown were once covered in vivid reds, blues, yellows, and greens. Time, weather, and pollution have stripped away most of the paint, but traces remain in protected areas, showing how spectacular these monuments once appeared. Hieroglyphics were painted in multiple colors, with different colors having symbolic meanings. Red represented chaos and evil, blue represented fertility and the Nile, green represented vegetation and rebirth. Fact 56. The ancient Egyptians invented sophisticated door locks over 4,000 years ago. A wooden lock and key system has been found in Egyptian ruins that used a simple but effective mechanism. The key was a large wooden implement with pins that aligned with holes in the bolt. When the key was inserted and lifted, the pins raised the bolt, allowing the door to open. This principle is remarkably similar to modern pin tumbler locks. The invention spread from Egypt throughout the ancient world and eventually evolved into the locks we use today. Fact 57. Ancient Egyptians believed their pharaohs became gods after death, joining the ranks of the divine. The elaborate funerary practices and magnificent tombs were designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transformation into a deity and continued existence in the afterlife. As gods, dead pharaohs continued to protect Egypt and influence earthly affairs. They could be consulted through priests and oracles who interpreted signs and dreams. This belief made the death of a pharaoh a religious event as much as a political one, requiring extensive rituals and ceremonies. Fact 58. The ancient Egyptians used pillows and headrests made of stone, wood, or ceramic rather than soft materials. These hard headrests elevated the head off the sleeping mat, keeping it cool in the hot climate and protecting elaborate hairstyles and wigs. While seemingly uncomfortable to us, Egyptians used them for thousands of years, and they were common household items. Wealthy individuals had beautifully carved headrests, sometimes inlaid with precious materials. The dead were buried with headrests to use in the afterlife. Fact 59. Ancient Egypt at its peak conquered and ruled vast territories beyond its traditional borders. During the New Kingdom, Egyptian control extended south into Nubia, modern Sudan, north into Syria and parts of modern Turkey, and east into the Sinai Peninsula. Egyptian influence reached even further through trade and diplomacy. Egyptian artifacts have been found throughout the ancient Near East and Mediterranean, showing the extent of their cultural and economic influence. Fact 60. The ancient Egyptians developed a standardized system of weights and measures used throughout the kingdom. The royal cubit, approximately 20.6 inches or 52.3 centimeters, was the standard unit of length. Stone and wooden cubit rods served as physical standards, ensuring consistent measurements across all construction projects and trade. This standardization enabled the building of their massive monuments with incredible precision and facilitated fair trade throughout the kingdom. Fact 61. Ancient Egyptians discovered and used nitrous oxide, or laughing gas, though they didn't understand it scientifically. They discovered that heating certain minerals produced gases that, when inhaled, caused euphoria and reduced pain. This knowledge may have been used during medical procedures to ease pain, and possibly in religious ceremonies to induce altered states of consciousness. The exact methods have been lost, but chemical analysis of residues in ancient vessels suggests they had some form of anesthesia. Fact 62. Workers building the royal tombs organized the first recorded strike in history in 1152 BCE. These skilled workers, who lived in the workers' village at Deir el-Medina, stopped work to protest late payment of their grain rations. They marched to nearby temples and sat down, refusing to work until they received their overdue pay. This labor action was documented on papyrus and is the earliest known strike. Remarkably, the strike was successful. The workers received their back pay, showing that even in ancient times, organized labor could achieve results. Fact 63. Ancient Egyptian jewelry was not just decorative but served protective and magical purposes. Amulets and jewelry were believed to protect the wearer from evil, bring good fortune, and ensure health. Different symbols provided different types of protection: the scarab beetle for rebirth and transformation, the ankh for life, the eye of Horus for protection and healing, the jed pillar for stability. Jewelry was made from gold, which never tarnished and was associated with the eternal flesh of the gods, and semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli, carnelian, and turquoise. Fact 64. The ancient Egyptians maintained strict standards of weights and measures for trade, overseen by temple officials who ensured fairness in commerce. Merchants who cheated customers by using false weights or measures faced severe punishment, including fines, public beatings, or even mutilation. Market inspectors regularly checked weights and measures. This system of regulated commerce helped Egypt's economy flourish and made Egyptian trade partners more confident in their dealings. Fact 65. Ancient Egyptians celebrated numerous festivals throughout the year, combining religious devotion with public celebration and entertainment. The Opet festival in Thebes lasted for weeks and involved elaborate processions where priests carried sacred boats containing statues of gods from Karnak Temple to Luxor Temple. These festivals included music, dancing, feasting, and religious ceremonies. They strengthened the connection between pharaoh, gods, and people, and gave ordinary people opportunities to participate in religious life and enjoy celebrations. Fact 66. The ancient Egyptians used salt for multiple purposes including preservation, purification, and religious ceremonies. Natron, a naturally occurring salt compound, was essential for mummification as it dried out bodies perfectly. Salt was used in cooking and preserving food. It was also used in religious ceremonies for purification rituals. Salt was valuable enough to be used in trade and taxation. The Egyptians understood salt's practical properties even if they attributed its effectiveness to magical qualities. Fact 67. Ancient Egyptian soldiers were well organized into infantry, archer, and chariot divisions. The army had a clear command structure and professional officers. Soldiers received training in weapons, tactics, and physical conditioning. They were paid with land grants, creating a loyal military force with a stake in defending the kingdom. Egypt's professional army allowed it to dominate the region for centuries, defending against invaders and conquering neighboring territories. Fact 68. The ancient Egyptians developed various forms of birth control and family planning, showing a practical and progressive approach to reproductive health. Medical papyri describe contraceptive methods using natural substances including acacia gum, honey, and plant fibers. While effectiveness varied, it demonstrates the Egyptians' practical approach to women's health and family planning. Some methods contained ingredients now known to have spermicidal properties. Fact 69. Ancient Egyptians loved storytelling and created rich literature that has survived to modern times. Tales of adventure, magic, morality, and the gods were popular entertainment. The tale of Sinew tells of an Egyptian official's exile and eventual return. The story of the shipwrecked sailor combines adventure with moral lessons. These stories were copied and recopied for generations, showing their enduring popularity. They give us insight into Egyptian values, fears, and dreams. Fact 70. The ancient Egyptians used copper tools to cut and shape stone for most of their history, not having iron tools until very late in their civilization. They cut massive granite blocks using copper saws and drills, employing sand mixed with water as an abrasive. The precision they achieved with these relatively simple tools is remarkable and still impresses modern engineers. Some cuts are so precise that paper cannot fit between the stone blocks. Fact 71. Ancient Egyptians recognized 3 distinct seasons based on the Nile River's annual cycle rather than temperature changes. Ake was the flooding season when the Nile overflowed its banks. Parate was the growing season when crops were planted and tended in the rich soil. Shimu was the harvest season when crops were gathered. This agricultural calendar governed Egyptian life, religious celebrations, and administrative activities. The entire society revolved around the Nile's rhythm. Fact 72. The ancient Egyptians created elaborate wigs from human hair, wool, and plant fibers that served multiple purposes. Both men and women wore wigs for formal occasions and daily life. Wigs protected the head from the intense sun, provided insulation from heat, and were symbols of social status and profession. Priests wore specific wig styles, as did different ranks of officials. Some wigs were quite elaborate, scented with oils and decorated with gold ornaments and precious stones. Fact 73. Ancient Egyptian children played with toys remarkably similar to modern ones, showing that childhood play has remained constant across thousands of years. Archaeologists have found dolls made of wood, clay, and cloth, some with movable limbs and real hair. Bowls made of leather stuffed with reeds or papyrus, spinning tops, toy animals on wheels, and even small boats have been discovered. Children also played physical games like leapfrog, tug-of-war, and various ball games. Fact 74. The ancient Egyptians traded extensively with civilizations across the known world. Egyptian goods including gold, papyrus, linen, grain, and artwork have been found in locations as far away as Scandinavia and China. They imported cedar wood from Lebanon for boat building and construction, incense from Punt on the Red Sea coast, silver from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and ivory and exotic animals from sub-Saharan Africa. This extensive trade network made Egypt wealthy and cosmopolitan. Fact 75. Ancient Egyptians practiced a form of mutual insurance through guilds and workers' associations. Members paid regular dues into a common fund. When a member became ill, was injured, or lost tools through no fault of their own, they received payments from the fund to help support themselves and their families. This early form of insurance and mutual aid helped protect workers from financial disaster and shows the Egyptians' practical approach to community welfare. Fact 76. The ancient Egyptians understood and used the concept of zero in their number system, though they represented it differently than we do today. They had a symbol for zero used in accounting and calculations. This mathematical sophistication was rare in the ancient world and shows the advanced nature of Egyptian mathematics. Their number system was decimal-based, counting in tens like we do today. Fact 77. Ancient Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods and took them very seriously. Dream interpretation was a respected professional skill, and trained interpreters could be consulted for a fee. Dream books listed common dreams and their meanings, somewhat like modern dream interpretation guides. Favorable dreams were seen as blessings, while nightmares required purification rituals and prayers to ward off evil. Some people slept in temples hoping to receive divine guidance through dreams. Fact 78. The ancient Egyptians created elaborate gardens and parks that were oases of beauty in the desert. Wealthy estates featured rectangular pools surrounded by trees, flowers, and vines arranged in geometric patterns. These gardens provided fruit, vegetables, shade, and beauty. They were considered earthly representations of paradise and were carefully designed and maintained. Garden scenes appear frequently in tomb paintings, showing their importance in Egyptian life and the desire to enjoy gardens in the afterlife. Fact 79. Ancient Egyptian musicians played a variety of instruments including harps, flutes, drums, rattles, bells, and early forms of guitars. Music accompanied religious ceremonies, celebrations, work songs, and entertainment. Musicians held respected positions in society, and some were employed full-time by temples and the royal court. Music was believed to have magical properties and could please the gods, heal the sick, and bring joy to both the living and the dead. Fact 80. The ancient Egyptians practiced crop rotation and understood the principles of maintaining soil fertility. They knew that growing different crops in sequence, particularly rotating grain crops with legumes, helped maintain soil health and productivity. This agricultural wisdom, gained through thousands of years of farming the same land, allowed them to feed a large population from the relatively limited arable land along the Nile without exhausting the soil. Fact 81. Ancient Egyptians used mirrors made of polished copper or bronze that could be buffed to provide clear reflections. These metal mirrors were prized possessions, often beautifully decorated with handles shaped like papyrus plants, lotus flowers, or figures of goddesses. The quality of reflection from these ancient mirrors was remarkably good. Wealthy individuals had multiple mirrors of different sizes, while poorer people might share a single mirror among family members. Fact 82. The ancient Egyptians operated a postal system for official government correspondence. Royal messengers traveled throughout the kingdom delivering letters, decrees, and reports. They carried special staffs or wore seals identifying them as official couriers, ensuring they received food, accommodation, and assistance from local officials on their journeys. This communication network helped pharaohs govern their large kingdom effectively. Fact 83. Ancient Egyptians celebrated birthdays, though primarily for pharaohs and nobles rather than common people. These celebrations included feasts, music, dancing, and gift-giving. The pharaoh's birthday was a national holiday with celebrations throughout Egypt. The concept of celebrating the anniversary of one's birth spread from Egypt to Greece and Rome, eventually becoming the widespread custom it is today. Fact 84. The ancient Egyptians used ingenious geometric techniques to build perfectly level foundations for their monuments. To create a level surface, they dug trenches around the building site and filled them with water. Since water naturally finds a level surface, they could mark the water level on the trench walls, then dig down to create a perfectly level base. This simple but effective technique enabled the construction of massive buildings with incredible precision using only basic tools. Fact 85. Ancient Egyptian art depicted the afterlife as a perfect, idealized version of earthly life. Tomb paintings show the deceased enjoying eternal feasts with abundant food and drink, hunting and fishing in lush landscapes, and spending time with family and loved ones. The afterlife was imagined as Egypt at its best, always fertile, always comfortable, always happy. This optimistic view of death helped Egyptians face mortality with less fear and encouraged them to live well to ensure a good afterlife. Fact 86. The ancient Egyptians used fingerprints for identification thousands of years before modern forensic science. Clay seals on wine jars and official documents bore the fingerprints of the person responsible for their contents. This served as a signature and proof of authenticity. Contracts and legal documents were pressed with fingerprints as a form of personal identification. This practice shows the Egyptians understood that fingerprints were unique to individuals. Fact 87. Ancient Egyptians organized time using a 10-day week rather than our 7-day week. Each month contained 3 weeks of 10 days each, making 30 days per month. The year had 12 months plus 5 extra festival days, creating a 365-day calendar year surprisingly close to the actual solar year of 365.25 days. This calendar system was more rational and mathematical than many other ancient calendars. Fact 88. The ancient Egyptians developed sophisticated winemaking techniques and produced wine in quantity. Wine was a luxury enjoyed mainly by the wealthy, though not as common as beer. Different regions produced different varieties of wine, and vintage, vineyard, and year were recorded on wine jars with remarkable detail, much like modern wine labels. The Nile Delta produced much of Egypt's wine, though some was imported from Greece and Palestine. Fact 89. Ancient Egyptian teachers used strict discipline and corporal punishment as teaching methods. Students who didn't study diligently could be beaten with sticks. A common saying was that a boy's ear is on his back, meaning that students learned better through physical punishment. While harsh by modern standards, this reflected the difficulty and importance of education. Learning hieroglyphics required years of practice, and teachers pushed students hard to master this complex skill. Fact 90. The ancient Egyptians believed animals had souls and intelligence, leading to the mummification of millions of animals. Cats, dogs, bulls, crocodiles, ibises, hawks, and many other animals were mummified. Some were beloved pets buried with their owners. Others were offerings to gods. Millions of ibis mummies were offered to Thoth, the god of wisdom. Animal mummies have been found in vast underground galleries, showing the scale of this practice. Fact 91. Ancient Egyptians used charcoal and sulfur for fumigation and disinfection of homes and temples. They burned these materials to purify spaces and ward off disease. While they understood it as a magical or religious practice, the smoke actually had antibacterial properties that reduced infection. This was another example of Egyptian practical wisdom wrapped in religious belief. Fact 92. The ancient Egyptians created artificial eyes for the living, not just the dead. Skilled craftsmen made realistic eye prosthetics from painted linen coated with resin. These artificial eyes were fitted into the eye socket, providing a cosmetic solution for those who had lost eyes to disease, injury, or birth defects. This shows the Egyptians' sophisticated approach to medical prosthetics and their concern for quality of life. Fact 93. Ancient Egyptian perfumes and scented oils were highly prized luxuries throughout the ancient world. They created complex fragrances using myrrh, frankincense, lotus flowers, cinnamon, and many other ingredients. Perfumes were used in religious ceremonies to please the gods, applied to mummies to preserve and honor the dead, and worn by the living as luxury items. The process of making perfume involved steeping flowers and resins in oils, then filtering and blending to create signature scents. Fact 94. The ancient Egyptians understood and used the medicinal properties of many plants that modern science has validated. Aloe vera was used for skin conditions and burns. Willow bark, which contains the compound used to make aspirin, was used for pain and fever relief. Garlic was prescribed for strength and heart health. Honey treated wounds and infections. Many Egyptian remedies were effective, though they also prescribed ineffective or harmful treatments. Fact 95. Ancient Egyptians practiced dentistry, including treating cavities and dental abscesses. While they couldn't prevent the dental problems caused by sand and their flour wearing down teeth, they developed treatments to alleviate pain and infection. Dental problems were so common that there were specialized tooth doctors. Some mummies show evidence of dental work including drilled teeth and even gold wire bridges replacing missing teeth.